There's something deep down inside of you and me that's always lurking. It's sneaky, it's devious, it's shifty. It's always looking for an opportunity to rear its ugly head, make a scene, and create a stir. What is it? What is that thing that always rises up without notice, always shows up uninvited, and always does far more damage than it is ever immediately apparent? What is it? It's this ugly little thing called pride. Pride, it's the ugliness that we see in other people. It's the ugliness we're so quick to point out in other people. It's the thing, if we're honest, we hate and despise to see in other people. Pride, it's the thing that turns us away and turns us off from other people. But ironically enough, it's the thing that is almost impossible to see in ourselves. Me and two of my best friends, we do breakfast together about once a month. And they're both in ministry as well. And so it's a great time for us to have some fun, get away, but also to challenge each other on being better leaders, better pastors, and better husbands. And one morning, we're sitting having breakfast at Marietta Square, and one of my best friends, Eugene, looks at me. He says, "Samer, I love you, but one thing I've noticed about you is that you're really difficult to disarm. In a conversation or in an argument or in a discussion, you usually get really, really defensive." And my immediate response was like, "No, give me examples. Come on, list them. When's the last time I did it? I'm the nicest person you've ever met, you know?" And it was like the writing was this moment where I was like, oh, maybe you're right. So I go home, my wife, Julie, and I said, "Hey, babe, I gotta ask you a question. I had a conversation with Eugene this morning. Can you give me some examples of times when you felt like I've been defensive?" And she looks at me with this smirk, she's about to laugh, and she says, "All the time." It's one of my biggest struggles in life, right? You guys see me on Sunday morning, and I'm always so nice and so happy, and oh my gosh, Samer, you're such a good pastor and stuff. And man, there it is. One of my biggest struggles is being defensive. And what is that? I mean, it's pride, right? I mean, when I'm in a conversation, when I'm debating, when I'm even in an argument, or whenever I'm trying to figure something out, my default is to think that I'm right, you're wrong. My natural response is to think, no, my idea is better than your idea. My response is to stand off and to wait for the other person to come to me, even if I'm only 5% wrong because they're 95% wrong. I get defensive so easily, and the closest people in my life see it all the time. They call it out, whether it be my friends, my wife, my boss, the people that I work with, they see it and they call it out. And it's a massive struggle. But what is that? It's pride. And the truth about pride is that it lives in each and every single one of us, whether you realize it or not, right? Maybe you might not think that you have a pride problem, right? Because the title of being prideful is reserved for the loudly arrogant and cocky. And so maybe you're left to think, well, I don't have a pride problem. But the truth is, there's pride in all of us. It's shifty, remember? It's devious, it's sneaky. It rises up without us even realizing it. In fact, to even say that you don't have a pride problem might be the very definition of a pride problem. And I say problem because pride never does anything good for you or to you or to the people around you. In fact, it's why C.S. Lewis famously said this about pride: unchastity, anger, greed, drunkenness, and all that are mere flea bites in comparison. Pride leads to every other vice. Pride is the gateway drug. Pride is the gateway vice. It leads to every other vice in your life and in my life. And the root of all the ugliness deep down inside of my heart is pride. And the root of all the ugliness deep down inside of your heart is pride as well. And so it's no surprise that King Solomon in the book of Proverbs gives us warning after warning after warning about the potential detriment of pride in our lives, one of which is found in Proverbs chapter 11, verse 2, where he says, when pride comes, then comes disgrace. When pride comes, when pride does the talking, when pride shows up in your life and in my life, it always has a +1, never shows up alone, and it's disgrace. That when we let pride do the talking, when we let pride do the acting, when we let pride control us and rise up in us, it always leads to disgrace. Well, what do you mean by disgrace? Well, shame or embarrassment or regret or a loss of trust and a loss of influence. Why? Because pride is the thing that keeps us from doing what we know we should do. Right? Fellas, before GPS, pride was the thing that kept you from asking for directions. And now with GPS, pride is the thing that keeps you from trusting when it recalculates. You know what I'm talking about? But pride is the thing that keeps us from doing what we know we should do. Pride is the thing that keeps us from apologizing. Pride is the thing that keeps us from extending forgiveness to somebody and instead hold a grudge. Pride is the thing that keeps us from showing weakness and being vulnerable and letting people in. Pride is the thing that keeps us from healthy and thriving relationships. Pride is the thing that keeps us from a growing faith. And for some of you, pride is the thing that keeps you from faith altogether. But pride is also the thing that causes us to do the things we know we shouldn't. Pride is the thing that causes you and me to feel joy when others fail. Pride is the thing that causes us to devalue and look down on other people. And pride is the thing that causes you to cheer for your kid's last name more than you cheer for their first name. Pride leads to disgrace. Pride is the thing that keeps us from doing what we know we should do and the very thing that causes us to do the things that we know we shouldn't. And disgrace doesn't feel good to you and it does not feel good to me. That's why so often after you've let pride rise up and control you, you're left thinking, why did I do that? Why did I say that? Why didn't I just go over there? Why did I act like that? And you can feel it tangibly inside of you, can't you? I mean, come on, there are moments, I feel this all the time with my wife or with anybody that I'm arguing with. I mean, there's something physically in me. I know I shouldn't, but there's something in me that causes me to say something that I know I shouldn't say. And even when I know I should go over and apologize, and maybe you felt this, there's literally something physically in me that is fighting against me. I can feel it going over there and apologizing when I know I was wrong. Pride. With it comes disgrace. But Solomon goes on, but with humility, the very antithesis of pride, it also has a plus one. It's one we don't always think to invite, but we'll run always glad when it shows up, and it is wisdom. With humility comes wisdom. Wisdom, in other words, insightful behavior, a healthy view of yourself, a proper dose of self-awareness, being able to read the room, knowing what to say and what not to say, prioritizing a person, prioritizing a relationship. Wisdom, it's interesting that while pride kind of blurs our reality, with wisdom, Solomon says, comes this clarifying, with humility, comes clarifying wisdom. Clarifying wisdom to do what's right, to do what we should do and not do what we shouldn't do. It's interesting. Pride literally stops us in our tracks. Right? Pride locks us into our past and it locks us into our mistake. Pride blurs our reality. Pride is the thing that hardens our hearts and is fuel for our ignorance. It allows us to feel like we're justified for what we did. It isolates us from people and maybe even blocks out God. And pride tells us to wait for the other person. In other words, pride paralyzes. Pride paralyzes. But humility, on the other hand, the humility that leads to wisdom, humility leads us to take the first step, even when we're only 5% wrong. Humility seeks out forgiveness. Humility admits wrongdoing. Humility seeks to love as Jesus loved us. Humility at all costs protects the relationship. Humility mobilizes. It's an interesting thought, isn't it? Pride paralyzes. Humility mobilizes. Pride paralyzes. Humility mobilizes. Pride literally stops us in our tracks. We're unable to move forward. We can't find reconciliation. There's no growth. There's no progress with pride. It suffocates our relationships. But with humility, when humility is leading the way, humility leads us forward. There's progress, there's growth, there's reconciliation. In fact, it was humility that mobilized Jesus, the Savior of the world, who was up in heaven, to come down to earth to die for the sins of the world. Pride paralyzes. Humility mobilizes. So let me just ask you a question. Where in your life are you stopped in your tracks? Where is pride paralyzing you? What influence are you losing? What relationship is suffocating? What potential growth in your heart and in your faith is lacking because pride is paralyzing? And what might it look like to let humility lead the way? What might it look like to let humility move you forward? How much more freedom could come to your relationships? How much more influence could you gain at the office? How much could your faith grow if we let humility lead the way? Because while pride paralyzes, with humility comes wisdom, and with it comes freedom that allows us to move forward. And that is good to know.
SAMER, man, that was fantastic. And some of the people know this. I know you and I have read a lot about this in Proverbs, man. He talks about humility and pride a lot because it's such a massively important topic, right? So I can ask you one quick question.
Sure.
'Cause I feel like I watched you do this, but I want you to explain this to everybody real quick. Okay. So we understand how humility, mobilizes all the good things in our life and the lives of those people around us. But so how do we practically practice humility, right? My very first kind of performance evaluation I got when I was started, being in ministry. When I was in the marketplace, somebody cared about this because the more prideful you were, it almost seemed to be good, although we knew it was tearing me apart. Then I got into ministry, and my very first performance evaluation, the guy said, "Yeah, you're just really cocky and prideful. That's going to be your downfall." And I remember sitting there going, I have no idea what to do with that, right? So for a couple of years, I tried to figure out, what does it look like? How do you practice humility? Can you explain that?
Yeah, it's interesting. Humility, it's not where you think less of yourself. And this isn't new, by the way. This isn't original with me. I learned this, who knows? Somebody thought of this a long time ago. But it isn't thinking less of yourself. It's real simple. Think of yourself less. So humility is thinking of yourself less. So when you're in an argument with your spouse, and the only reason isn't it funny, we argue even when we know we're wrong, we keep arguing, you know what I mean? I think so, I think that's pride. But when you're arguing and the only reason you're doing it is so that you can win, well, think of yourself less. I mean, when the only reason you won't forgive somebody, when the only reason you won't open up to somebody is because you don't wanna seem like you're weak, right? It's all about you, it's all about me. Well, okay, a great step is to think of yourself less. And I think if we do that, we can start practicing humility that way, and it'll start to move us forward.
Yeah,
so
that's fantastic, SAMER. Hey, will you guys give SAMER a hand again? Thanks so much.